Welcome to TRS Clips, the channel that we hope is like a brain workout for you.
So let's just talk about ego, identity, and the self for a minute. So here's what confuses a lot of people. So here we are talking about the default mode network. And I'm saying it's basically bad. It's not bad. It's a necessary function. When it becomes hyperactive, you will be thinking about yourself too much. And if you pay attention to your own thoughts, usually when you're thinking about yourself, they're like negative, right? Like I'm like, oh my God, I'm ugly. Maybe I look a little bit weird. So here's the weird thing. So if we're sort of trying to quiet the ego and we shut off the ego, then what's left? So there's this concept in, yoga and meditation and stuff about the self or the Atman and the soul. And how is that different from the mind? So if you look at someone who's like a hard neuroscientist, they will say there's no such thing as the soul, which is like fair enough from a scientific perspective, but let's examine our own experience. So if you look at your mind, what you'll notice is that when we call the mind is like thinking and emotions. There's mental activity, right? We have thoughts. So a thought comes and goes. An emotion comes and goes. So the mind fluctuates. Even ego can get stronger and can get weaker. And we can turn it on and off. So I'll give you a really good example. We think like maybe the ego is with me all the time, but no. So if you really pay attention, let's say that I'm using the toilet. When I'm using the toilet, I don't even have an ego. I'm not a man. I'm not a woman. I'm like no one. I'm just someone who's using the toilet. Imagine for a moment that you were just alive for one moment in time, 6 seconds. That's all you were alive. And it was when you were using the toilet. You would have no sense of identity, right? So our identity is something that we accumulate on us over time. So what the self is, it's the part that can look at the mind. It is the capacity for experience. So in your mind, you may have anger. You may be angry at someone. You're thinking certain negative thoughts, but you can actually take a step back and look at that from the outside.
Meditation creates distance between thoughts and perception. It's the same thing that you're saying.
Yeah.
The process of meditation creates distance between what you're perceiving and the thoughts that your brain is throwing up.
And ideally, the meditation's goal is to shut off the mind completely.
Yeah.
And then people get confused because if I don't have an active mind, then am I asleep? No. So here's the interesting thing. When you really meditate well, and there are a couple good examples of this. So like if we think about the moment of climax, like sexual climax, in that moment, you're not thinking anything. You're just present. You may be thinking right before and you're going to be thinking right after, but in that moment, when you're looking at a sunset, your mind isn't actually active. You're just absorbed in that thing and you're noticing it and you're appreciating it and you feel content, but you're just lost in it almost, right? So there's something you can shut off the mind and then what you're left with is the self. What you're left with is the Atman. And the other way to kind of think about it, and I encourage people who are skeptical of this to be skeptical. That's good. I started out skeptical too. And then you have to run your own experiments. You have to become your own scientist. And then look at the fact that you can look at your mind. So if you can look at your mind, what is doing the looking?
Ooh, man.
Right?
Love that.
So and then you'll say, but that's my mind. Well, hold on a second. But what is doing the looking and what is the object of perception and what is the organ of perception? And that's where you get to this idea of the self. And so there's a really cool technique like in psychiatry, right? In this part of psychiatry called cognitive behavioral therapy, they say that there's this problem called thought fusion. So this is kind of weird, but when you become mentally ill, you mistake your thoughts for facts. So when someone has a panic attack, in their mind is telling them you're dying. They're not dying. The problem is they believe their mind. The mind tells you you're dying, you're dying, you're dying. And you believe it. You're like, oh my God, I'm dying. And the interesting thing is that the more you believe your mind, the more mentally ill you become.
Delusional.
Perfect. Brilliant. Took the words out of my mouth. So the more severe illness, hallucination, delusion, psychosis, those people are more mentally ill usually than someone who has a panic attack. Right? So in that moment, their mind is telling them hey, this is true. These people are following you. These people are poisoning you, and they believe it. They can't disbelieve their mind. Then you have a panic attack. Then you have anxiety. So even in anxiety, there's a part of you that you're like worried about this, but there's a part of you that like, okay, that may not happen. You can doubt your mind. Then there's the normal human being who has doubts about their mind every day. Oh, well, is that really going to happen? Okay, like I know I think this, but there's just a part of me that thinks this. And then as you move, so that's kind of treatment, right? Where we have like pathology, where we have someone who's ill, and then we bring them back to baseline.
I call this perception. What did you call it? Consciousness, you said.
Oh, yeah, consciousness or awareness.
Okay. So just for the sake of this conversation, maybe I nudge viewers to view this as a camera inside your own head.
Yes. So here's the key thing. So perception is also of the outside world, but you can perceive the mind.
Yeah.
Right? Which is weird.
It's like when one does a shamanic psychedelic mushroom ceremony. Once it kicks in, they tell you to lie down and close your eyes because you need to explore your own head and not explore the world. But this is just a psychedelic experience without the mushroom.
Yeah, so here's what I think is cool about that. So here's what's tricky, if I can go off on a tangent.
Please.
So we're talking about this stuff, right? And if you're someone who's skeptical, you're like, there's no scientific evidence of this. And this is where we have to understand something about spirituality. Remember I was saying like, some of this stuff is scientifically verified, but some of it isn't. I think some of this stuff can never be scientifically verified. And there's a fundamental reason for this. So if we look at your experience, that can never be scientifically verified. So this is what's kind of weird. I've asked, and maybe you guys can ask, and if there's a neuroscientist who disagrees with me, there's no proof of thought. We have no scientific evidence of thought.
Okay. We can't quantify thought.
We can't detect thought. Forget about quantifying. We can't even detect it. We can measure electrical activity in the brain. We can measure blood flow in the brain. We can measure blood flow to tissue, but that's not thought. We have no instrument that can even detect whether you are thinking. All we can do is ask someone, so how do we know which part of the brain emotions come from? Because we ask them. When we see this part of the brain light up, I ask you, what are you feeling? And then you say, I'm afraid. Then we say, okay, that's where fear comes from. Because we asked 100 people, when this part of your brain lights up, what are you feeling? And they all said fear. That's where fear comes from. But we have no evidence of the feeling of fear. We only can tell that this part of the brain is lit up. So one of the things that took me a while to understand is in the meditative tradition, they talk about gross and subtle. They talk about material and non-material. So if you think about your subjective experience, there's no evidence that you even think or exist. So I don't know if this makes sense.
Yeah.
Ranveer, I can't tell if you're a hallucination or a bot or a part of the matrix. You could be a hallucination in my head. And I've had patients, I can tell you stories if you want, really scary stuff, right? So I once had a patient who was in a coma, was in the neuro ICU, a man in his late 40s, has been in a car accident, was in a coma for a while. They were concerned about brain damage and things like that, but he's recovering well. So I go to him and I ask him, how are you doing? He's like, I'm doing okay. It's like, what do you understand about your prognosis? So I have to do 6 months of physical therapy, but basically like, I'm going to be back to normal. What's going on with your job? I'm a partner at a law firm. It's not a big deal. Like my partners have said, take the time that you need to recover. No financial concerns. How are things with your family? My wife is supportive. My kids are supportive. Both of my sons are supportive. It's like totally fine. And so then, I go to the primary team. I'm like, he seems fine. And they're like, yeah, there's something off. And I felt something was off too. So once you consult with a patient, you have to kind of see them every day because you can't miss something. So I go to see him the next day and I go see them the next day. I go see them the next day. Every day, everything's fine. How's physical therapy going? It's hard, but it's fine. So about 5 days in, he's being discharged the next day. And I'm like, look, I come and see you every day and you seem fine every day. But like when I sit with you, you don't feel fine. And it's fine. Like I don't think anything's wrong, but like what's going on? Like what are you really feeling? So that's when he starts crying. And I'm like, what's going on there? So he tells me that while I was in a coma, I lived a whole life. I was married, and instead of 2 sons, I had 2 daughters. And I remember everything about them. I remember when they were born. I remember when, my daughter got ready for prom. And so like basically what he's doing is like he realizes that that's all fake. But he's like, I know that's fake, but he's grieving. He's like, I realize I'm never going to see those people again, and I'm heartbroken.
Damn, bro.
even though they're not real. But I lived it. He's like, this is, it messes with my head. And I know I'm crazy. And I know, like, I love my family in this life too. But it's like that. What is that? What's going on? What's wrong with me? Will this go away?
How long was he in the coma for?
1 week.
And it lived a whole life in that.
He lived a whole life.
Damn.
Right? And that's not the only time that happens. We have very, very well recorded experiences when people are about to die of this time dilation, right? In the moment before death. And actually, not the moment before death. Here's what's really crazy. Everyone's like, we don't know what happens after death. That's actually technically untrue. We do have reports of what happens after people die because people are medically dead. And then we bring them back to life. Like technically, right? And there's lots of arguments against that. But like technically this person is dead. And then we resuscitate them. You can be dead for a few seconds.
Yeah. Let's just like stay here for a bit. And let's talk
wild.
about this. Let's talk about this stuff. This is like, let's go back to this guy.
Yeah.
And then I'd love for you to break down more of these stories.
Yeah, sure. So like here's what I'll say. So like, I started this stuff and I'm skeptical of this, right? Because it's like past lives and soul and whatever. Like this is there. And then what happens is you sit with humans who tell you these stories. And that now my job is this person's psychiatrist is like, how am I supposed to help this person? Because what they feel is real. So do I tell them like, okay, this is just a hallucination. It's not real. And I believe that, he believes that, and we try to figure out what to do about it. And then like weird things start to happen, right? Because you hear about these stories again and again. I was talking about time dilation. So the other thing that'll happen is when people die, they will have this experience of like reliving their whole life. And they will also have a perceptual experience of things like light at the end of the tunnel, an immense sense of peace. And it's so interesting. I've had patients that have been resuscitated, and the thing that they're most upset about is that we brought them back to life. That what they felt on the other side was absolute peace.
Yeah.
And it feels like, they have this feeling of like being jerked back into life. Now, you can say that, okay, this is a hallucination in the brain. Fair enough. But this is where things get tricky. This is where this idea of subjective experience comes from, where the brain has all of these things that happen, but that's not the same as your subjective experience. These things are correlated, but they're not the same. And here's the really cool thing. So I really started to understand this stuff once I realized that in the material world, we have certain tools that allow us to enhance our perception and explore the world. I can take a regular human being 5,000 years ago, doesn't have a telescope, doesn't have a microscope, doesn't have a boat. Therefore, what they have access to in the real world is very limited. But we as humans did something really cool, man. We developed technology. We built a boat and we sailed around the world. We built a telescope and looked at the stars. We built a microscope and discovered bacteria. So our understanding about the material world grew through the development of these technological tools that give you access to things that human beings without them will never understand. Do you know if there's any technology to explore subjective world, the non-material world? Do we have technology? It's called meditation. Meditation is a telescope for the subjective world. It's a telescope for consciousness. I know that sounds weird, but it's like, we have these thoughts and these feelings. We have this human experience, and then we can do things like psilocybin or whatever that give us a perception that is beyond. It's like essentially a telescope for consciousness. And you have these weird things like out-of-body experiences, and there's certain meditation techniques that you can cultivate those kinds of experiences. So you can start to like explore the non-material realm of just subjective experience. And you can experience all kinds of weird things like devas and asuras and deities, and that's where all that stuff comes from.
Or you're also just taking your internal mind camera all over your brain and seeing different parts of it.
No, not at all. So I think I know it's weird, it's hard to understand, but like, here's what I'm saying. So when in the real world, I see with my two eyes, but if I have a telescope, I can see way more. So if you close your eyes and you just observe yourself, you cannot feel prana, okay? Right? There's this thing called prana or chi, but we can't feel it. Except we can do a practice where you can get a sense of your chi. And like, we can do it right now. So do this, Ranveer. Okay, so like everyone else at home, like, this is the pranam position, Anjali Mudra. And now what I want you to do is spread your hands a little bit. And what I want you to do is, do you feel the warmth between your hands?
Yeah.
Okay, expand. But only as far as you feel the warmth. You still feel the warmth here? Go further. Yeah. Go as far as you feel warmth. Do you still feel warmth?
It's a little lesser.
Little less. So keep going and let me know when you stop feeling it. Right? So anyone can do this at home. You feel something.
Yeah.
Now, when you're over here, there's a biological reason to feel it because your hands are emanating heat. And so you can detect the heat between both hands. When you go this far and you still feel warmth, there's no heat that you can feel. But you can still have a perception of it.
Yeah. This can be experienced on a much deeper degree in a Tai Chi session or in a Qigong session.
Exactly, right? So human beings will have these experiences where they can feel stuff that is not material. You have this capacity. And the most simple feeling that you have that is not material is your own experience.
Gotcha.
Right? You can see the color red. We can tell you that your photoreceptors are activating, your occipital cortex is activating, but that's not red. So meditation is a set of techniques to develop your internal telescope.
Gotcha.
And when I work with these patients, we've had to explore some of this stuff because that's how I help them. So I've had some patients, for example, so this person with the coma, we ended up basically doing grief processing for that life. We tried to make sense of it, right? So I was like, how do you understand this?
Do you think he actually traveled somewhere? Or his consciousness went somewhere?
Yes. I think that what he experienced was not a temporary hallucination made up by the mind. And the reason I believe that is because I've spent thousands of hours with people who are hallucinating, right? I know what hallucination looks like when you're sitting with someone who's hallucinating. This person was not hallucinating. That's not what that was. Now, it feels a lot more real. There's genuine grief. If I had not known this person's history, I would not be able to tell the difference. If this person had come into my office and they'd actually lost their family forever, or because I've had people like that too, it's very similar to that. It's a very genuine grief. It's not hallucinated. There's certain things that are different about hallucinated grief and delusion. It just feels different to sit with.
थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग द क्लिप दोस्तों. मेरा होप यह है कि आप हर हफ्ते इसी चैनल पर लौट आओ ताकि जितने भी पॉडकास्ट हम अपलोड कर रहे हैं ना, उनका सार आपको इस चैनल पर मिले.